Welcome to the Determined People podcast. We are committed to bringing encouragement, strength, and hope into a world that's in desperate need of it. Our world needs hope. I think you'll agree. Hope is what keeps us going in our darkest moments. When we feel like we can't go on, we hang on to hope. One of the subjects that I talk about on the show is why people don't succeed. You know, I've been fortunate to interview some incredible guests, so many incredible guests who've achieved great success, but the show is not about the success. It's about the battle to get there. Nobody achieves notoriety or success without having a lot of setbacks, a lot of struggles, because success is not a straight line. It's not the paved road. It is a road full of potholes and crags and everything else. So the ones that succeed, the ones that make it, are the ones who refuse to give up. Persistence and resilience are the difference makers. Now, our guest today is an expert on resilience. Christian Moore is a name many of you are familiar with. Christian is an internationally renowned speaker, author of The Resilience Breakthrough, and the founder of the WhyTry program, which actually teaches resilience to kids in school. Yes, you can teach resilience. WhyTry has been in over 30,000 schools since its founding. Today we know Christian and his life's work, but Christian Moore is a name we probably should have never heard of. His life story is a testament to the power of resilience and the power of love. So strap in and get ready for a high energy interview. I'm nuclear fired, as you know, so is Christian. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Welcome, Christian. Thank you for being here.
Awesome to be here. And, I love what you were saying in the intro about hope, because I know during the pandemic and, I'm this expert. We'll talk about what it means to be an expert on resilience. It's actually maybe a curse, but I always said, don't write a book on resilience. Your life will get way more complex. The universe is like, oh, your resilience, we'll test it. But anyway, during the pandemic, it just meant a lot to me when I was watching your clips, YouTube clips and stuff, because, you're clear and concise, and I just needed that advice that day. So I do want to thank you for what you did there.
Well, thank you, because stuff like that encourages me. Sometimes I look at myself and I go, why do I do this? Oh, because of comments like that. And at the right moment in my life, I'll get a comment like that and go, okay, keep going. You're doing something that is benefiting, enriching others, and that's why I do it, not for myself. I don't need to listen to myself. I listen to myself all day long. So, Christian, I want to start off with your early life. Tell us about growing up. You grew up between Baltimore and DC,
Yeah.
But tell us about growing up. What was that like?
Oh man, I look back now, and I think probably most of what I do today is because of those experiences when I was young. I grew up in a family of 5 brothers, 6 sisters. My mom got married really, really young, had me and an older sister, got a divorce. She met a man who had 6 kids, whose wife had just left him with 6 kids and never came back. I look at that now as a therapist and think that might have been a hint to my mom. But they got together and had 4 more kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the 8th child. My mom had something called social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder. My mom had a fear of leaving the house, and I'll share more a little bit later, but that anxiety was passed down to me. I've dealt with severe anxiety most of my life, and battling through that. And then my dad, he's one of the most fascinating people I've ever met in my life. I struggled in school and stuff with learning disabilities, but my dad was literally a genius. He graduated from high school in Arlington, Virginia, 2 years early, went to work for the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service could tell he had a tremendous talent. You could say to him 5,896 times 852, and he could instantly rattle that off the top of his head like a calculator.
He was Rain Man.
Oh, literally. Have you ever seen the movie Rain Man, Beautiful Mind? You met my dad, especially Beautiful Mind.
Yeah.
And just had a huge heart. Most loving guy. Another really funny side note you'll enjoy, John, is he was also a professional duck pin bowler. When he was a little boy, he was a pin setter. They would sit on a board, they would roll the bowling ball, down the alley, and he could sit up there on the board, and the pins would go flying everywhere. They had a little shield in front of him. Then he'd hop down and set the pins up and stuff. And so
I bet he set them up perfectly too.
Yeah, with that eyeball in there. But and then he used to bowl in these professional bowling leagues and stuff. So I spent a lot of time as a kid in bowling alleys till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on school nights, smoky bowling alleys. And so, so he's an incredible person. He graduates from high school, and again, he's working at the Postal Service, and a white car pulls up, and they drive him to a place called NSA, the National Security Agency. Mm-hmm. And he becomes the highest level code breaker. And so my dad was, literally a spy. I'm gonna write a book one day, Son of Spy. But I remember my school teacher saying, hey, every kid, like in 3rd grade, we had to write down, draw a picture of what our dads do. And I look back, they should have been asking what my mom does too, but it's during the early 70s. So I'm sitting there, and every kid, is drawing a picture of what their dad does, and I'm just sitting there staring blank. And the teacher comes over to me and is like, what does your dad do? And I go, I have no idea what he does. Now, I learned years later, because of what he did, I couldn't go to any foreign countries until I was like over 21, and some, because he was such a high level code breaker, I could be kidnapped and all this stuff. It was kind of crazy. Yeah. But but I go home, that night, I go, Dad, what do you do? What do you do for that? He said, draw a picture of me sitting at a desk doing a crossword puzzle. And I go, okay. And so I draw,
You can get paid for that?
Yeah, doing a crossword puzzle, because he's kind of breaking these codes, and the only way he can explain it to the child, is he's a puzzle solver. And it's funny, the teacher, next day I hand it to the teacher, she goes, oh, your dad must work at NSA. So I know if a lot of other kids did that or not, sure. But I thought that was a funny moment. But, my dad was I look back, he was, it's hard, as a therapist, I'm not supposed to diagnose my dad, but I would say he had, either Asperger's or, just really.
Some autism.
Yeah, some autism, Asperger's. But he was one of the most loving people in the world. He would pick up every hitchhiker he saw on the road. Mm-hmm. So there'd be like 8 kids in the car, and my mom would be begging, don't stop the car. A lot of times geniuses don't have common sense or social skills, right? So he's like, well, that guy needs a ride. I have a nice vehicle. I remember him trying to explain to my mom, why would I not pick up that hitchhiker? My car works. Everybody else is driving by the hitchhiker. Mm-hmm. So he logically could not understand why every car would not stop, to pick that guy up.
You had compassion modeled for you at an early age.
Yeah. And he picked up every hitchhiker. We met a lot of people. Might be why I ended up being a social worker.
Yeah. Well, I had my background, but I've often thought about writing a book called Unintentional Lessons, things I learned just from observing my dad, because I did learn things just from watching him, like how to talk to people, how to get along with people. Yep. Even though he wasn't a really good father, I did learn some things. But I don't think my dad was that smart to know what he was modeling for me.
Yeah, my dad didn't either.
Yeah, we got 8 kids in the car, you and me. What's one more, right?
Yeah.
But tell me about, you didn't have a lot of structure in your house.
Yeah. Best way to describe my childhood is like a kite flying in the air. If you cut the string on the kite, it'd blow away for a few feet. The kite would come crashing to the ground. And my metaphor here, the string represents laws and rules. And because of my parents' mental health issues, they gave me a lot of freedom. And was it fun having that freedom at times? Absolutely. But I know, the listeners out there know, you too much freedom, you're going to crash hard. Yeah. And so, but that freedom, I've also carried into my later life, and I really fight for freedom. I fight for freedom of others. I think freedom is one of the greatest things in the world. And what I mean by freedom, just the freedom to think, the freedom to assess what's going on around you. That's one of the few things I've carried over to my own kids, my own family is, hey man, you're responsible for yourself, and I'm going to support you, but you got to do the hard work. You got to, and then helping my kids understand that you actually have more freedom, as they make good decisions. Now, I was making a lot of bad decisions, which started influencing my freedom a little bit, which I'll share in a minute. But it's interesting. My dad would just say to me, every time I left the house, and I'd be up to 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd be walking out the house like at midnight. I remember him just sitting on the couch, and he would go, all right, Christian, what would Jesus do? You make that decision when you walk out there. I'm literally walking out the streets and hanging out with drug dealers. And I'm hearing my dad. Well, I first got exposed to that. I was about 7 years old. Yeah. Was when I first started kind of being out there on the streets and running around with a pretty tough crowd a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So, and you said something. I remember when I first heard your story that when the police would pull up, what would happen?
So it's interesting. I had several of these older kids. I remember they got busted on the news, for dealing drugs and stuff. And there's this one guy, he's almost like a bodyguard to me, protect me. I remember watching him walk out of the high school handcuffed, made the news, big story. And I was like, wow. So, I mean, and I want to be clear. I think sometimes we judge people really hard that are involved in the street world, the drug world. I mean, these guys had not a lot of resources. As bad as my home life was, you know, their home lives were 10 times tougher. And I'm glad I got exposed to that at a really, really young age. But anyways, I'd be out there in the streets, and the older kids figured out, you know, if we put all the drugs on this cute little white kid with curly hair and dimples, we'll have plenty of time to get away. So they taught me, because I was so young, you know, they're like, hey, Christian, when the police roll up, you run towards the police. We're going the opposite direction, of course, you know. So I'd run over towards the police. Remember, I have all the drugs on me.
Yeah.
They never check me. So what they would do is, they'd open the back of the car, I sit down, they would hand me Washington football team cards. That's kind of community outreach, yeah. And, you know, they'd drive me home, they talk to my parents a little bit about, hey, you shouldn't be out here that late at night. And then sometimes they see the kids I'm out there with, they're like, man, you got to get away from those kids. But they're like, well, you know, there's no way this guy is doing it. And in their defense, I'm sure at my age, they're like, oh, there's no way. You know, he was exposed, or he's doing this directly. And say I was running around these drugs. I didn't, you know, exchange money or do any of that kind of stuff. I was just having fun hanging out with these guys. And this is during the late 70s, early 80s, when kind of rap hip hop music came down from New York, and we'd be out there on the street corner with the boom boxes, break dancing. You know, we didn't wear the baggy pants. If I see kids today, we wore the really tight parachute pants with all the zippers on it. If you were really down with it, you wore the one white glove and stuff. And so we
everybody wanted to be Michael Jackson.
Yeah, everybody wanted to be MJ, man. So so anyways, that experience taught me, you know, there is a real thing around just the color of your skin, or the pigmentation of your skin, determines how people with a lot of power and authority are going to interact with you. So again, in fact, I got exposed to some of that stuff at 7 years old, you know, has really, I felt a big responsibility to speak out that skin pigmentation should not determine your economics, your future, all those things. And yeah, that was a life-changing experience.
Yeah, but every experience, I was saying this last night, by the way, I've got to let our audience know, I've met Wendy.
Oh my goodness.
I'm in the inner circle. I have met Wendy. I've met her, and she's an incredible woman. You've surrounded yourself with some wonderful people.
Yeah, Wendy's my wife of 30 years. Yeah. And she's the opposite of me. She's quiet, extremely kind, wants no attention. And so
she has a very gentle, peaceful spirit about her. No question about it. And she's engaging as well.
Oh, she's
very smart. She's got to be up for sainthood somewhere, right?
Absolutely, man. Being married to me for 30 years is incredible. And it's like I talk about her in all my different speeches, and you know, she helped me get to school and did some amazing things in my life. And very few people have met her. So, John, as I speak for the audience to know, I speak across the country, and I speak in all 50 states, and very few people have met her. So it was kind of a cool moment.
Everybody wants to, but I have. So honestly, it was a great honor. It was a great honor to meet her and your son Carson as well. Yeah. So pull your mic a little bit closer because it cuts out. So but you also you had a childhood friend who was very important to you.
Yeah. So let's talk about just being out there on the streets. When I failed first grade. When I was in first grade.
That's when most people fail first grade.
Yeah. I think the geniuses failed first grade. I don't know, but it was too simplistic what they were teaching us, so I couldn't pay attention to anything else. But I met this young man named Sean Jackson, and it was a life-changing experience. He was like no other kid in that class, no other kid I'd ever met.
How was he different?
Well, it was funny. He was I look back at it. He was a first grader that had the ability to have unconditional love. I mean, he would check on me, sitting in class, he'd look over at me, he knew I was struggling academically, he would help me with my homework. He just was this young kid and knew I I was hurting.
At
I was
6 years
struggling.
old. At 6 years old. That's
But
just how he's hardwired. That's a gift, man.
but I learned. He learned that from his mom, which I'll talk about in just a second.
Yes.
But I've never shared this publicly, by the way, but I'm sharing right now. He just say that we had like instant love for each other, and like I'd go over to his house all the time, and this might sound a little strange, but I remember being, we're 6 years old, and his mom would, when I spent at his house, would put me in the bathtub with him, and being a little white kid taking a bath with a little African American boy, and I just remember thinking, man, we're the same. Does that make sense? I mean, and I was light. I'm really light. I've got no color to me, and
but you never really noticed the difference in anything until you're taught.
Yeah, but it's absolutely. But it's interesting. I was just with him a few weeks
ago.
Yeah. And we were talking about, and again, Richard, we were talking about this kind of intimate thing between me, but being little kids, and like we both remember being in that bathtub 10 times and just connecting with each other, at a kind of emotional level. That sounds kind of crazy at that, but it was a life-changing thing for him and me, and our lives ended up really kind of colliding in a lot of different interesting ways. For example, so his mom, I connected with her really young, and
you didn't call her Mrs. Jackson. What did you?
No, I called her Momma Jackson. Yes. Momma Jackson, and so she started seeing me out there in the streets. She'd come home, late at night. She sold cosmetics for Mary Kay and had this Grand Am, selling all these cosmetics.
Pink cars,
yeah. And so she sees me out there, late at night a couple of times, and one day she had it. She sees me out there, and she's like, "What are you doing out here? You got to get home. You cannot hang out with my son Sean anymore." Because she knows what I'm out there in the streets doing. Yeah. She comes down with a hammer. Well, she says, "You can't be in any of his classes. Don't set foot on our property." And this is a family, that I'm pretty connected to. They're really nurturing me. My home life didn't nurture me, but the Jacksons are nurturing me tremendously. And to have that just taken away, I remember it's like getting kicked in the gut.
Absolutely.
10 times. And luckily, Sean explains to her the next day, "Hey, this is what Christian's home life is like. They've been in this house for 10 years. They have no pictures up on the wall. One of the walls had a bunch of holes in it. I'd open up the refrigerator 5,000 times, coming up from school, hoping that something would magically appear in the refrigerator. And when something didn't appear in the refrigerator, I had anger management issues and stuff. And so, then he's like, he's got this dad that's really funny, kind of crazy. And there's not a lot of food in the house. Sean explains all this to his mom. And a couple of days later, I'm walking to school, and Momma Jackson comes flying out of her house in this blue bathrobe. And she says, "I'll tell you what, if you start going to school every day, I want to see your report cards. If you start answering to me, you can eat in our house anytime you want." Now, Momma Jackson's a seriously good cook. That's the real reason why I'm top physical condition. Now, those that aren't watching this online, I'm sitting at about a good 255 right now. See, now they're laughing.
Yeah, but you're not 6'8" either.
Yeah, 5 foot. I'm 7. And now you got the vision, but good looking. I mean, good facial structure.
It's more important to look good than anything else, right?
Oh man, and so.
Do you remember what went through your mind when you saw her come flying out of her house in her blue bathrobe? She'd already laid the hammer down on you.
Yeah. I thought she was going to give me a massive lecture on, "Hey, you better not be on that streets." I thought she would come down with the hammer, but what she came down with, because you look at the position she was in, she literally could have come at me with conditional love and say, "Hey, just really be upset with me." But she really sat there with unconditional love and said, "Look, Christian, I understand you're going through some difficult things. We're going to be here for you. You can come eat in this house anytime you want." I'm kind of, she flipped what she said the day before, and she came with tremendous, compassion. She's an incredibly loving, spiritual lady. She grew up in Petersburg, Virginia, in a loving home, and just, I don't know, the level she learned that love is breathtaking. You know what I mean? And I've never, to this day, I've really never experienced that kind of love outside of my own immediate family.
It gives you hope for the human race when you hear about people like this.
Yeah.
And that she imparted it. She modeled that for her son, and he embraced it.
yeah, and I work, because it's interesting. My relationship with Sean, I'm like, man, I mean, to let me have access to his parents at a young age and share that and stuff, and he's very close to his parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing. Just a couple weeks ago, I was talking to Sean. I was like, hey, I'm grateful for that. And just when both of our lives, and me being a white kid, spending some time raised in an African American home, and seeing the challenges he has in this world he's been through, and he's more academic than me. I mean, he would do my homework for me and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and just have a conversation about the opportunities I've had, different opportunities and challenges he's had, and he has the ability, and he's done great. He's done amazing things, but it's been quite the education.
Did you honor what Momma Jackson asked you to do? Did you ever skip school anymore? Did you stay pretty close to the edge on that
Well,
one?
let me share this with you. As a child, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I'm sure the audience has picked up on. You got two people talking with ADHD. If anybody wonders what, and me and John, we don't just have ADHD, we have severe ADHD. So there's mild, moderate, and severe.
But we look good, right?
Yeah.
As I said, strap in.
Yeah. So so as a child, I was diagnosed with ADHD conduct disorder. Now, conduct disorder is you don't violate the rights of others. You violate the rights of others. You really do not follow directions, because to be conduct is to not follow A, B, C, D, right? And so, and I'll be really frank with you, most of my life has been two parallel worlds. So like when I was with her, I was extremely respectful. Not real proud of it, but I knew how to act around her, where she'd give me a lot of freedoms as well. Trust me, yes. So to be really honest with you, I was still running the streets at times, but she was my refuge from that. Mm-hmm. And maybe I look back, maybe she knew that and knew that because of my home life, she had to respect my parents. My parents were still my biological parents. A little funny side note, she came to my house one day and she was tired of what was going on. And she goes to my dad, she kind of pretty serious. She goes, if you want us to adopt him, take him over. We'll be more happy to do that. My dad, because he has unlimited, he never stops being a comedian as part of his Asperger's, and he goes, oh great, you can take him. He costs us so much money and stuff. But as a child, you still want. I've worked as a social worker. I've worked in foster care and different stuff. Even if your home life is very dysfunctional, it's still your family. You want
to belong.
Yeah,
you want to belong. I studied that when I was in college. I was a psych major, and we studied about kids who are, even in the CPS program, when they're removed from very violent, dangerous situations, and they know it's dangerous and violent, they still want to be with their family.
Yep, and I was that situation. And
I
had the best. Yeah, I had the best of both worlds. And my parents, were very Orthodox religious, and so they had a lot of kindness. It was really funny. I could get away with almost anything Monday through Saturday, but Sunday they weren't playing around. And so again, my whole life has been these extreme parallel worlds. And by the end of this podcast, I'll share a lot of these parallel worlds. But my dad, that moment, I remember just sitting there going, Dad, you're still my dad. Now, it's interesting. He's my, I'm adopted to him. And I really believe anybody can have you, but it's who raises you, is your dad. So I'm always, I'm grateful for that. And he just passed away not too long ago. I was his adopted son. And my brother called me and said, hey, we were looking in Dad's wallet. And he only had one picture in his wallet. And it was a picture of you.
Oh no, really?
And I was like, whoa. I was like in shock.
That can impact your day, right?
Yeah. And so,
wow.
Yeah, that was an interesting moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you started straightening up, started eating at Jackson's house probably every day that you could.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And then you went to, you ended up, how did you go from Baltimore?
Yeah.
How'd you end up in Provo, Utah?
Oh,
Which
man.
we're at Sundance right now. So how'd you end up here?
So when I say I lived in these parallel worlds, I spent half my life, growing up in the Washington, D.C. area and Baltimore area, and then the other half of my life living in the Rocky Mountains, out here in Utah. And so, Yeah, I decided, I'm an artist. I only had two skills growing up. I could talk nonstop. And I could draw really good, And so there's a water tower behind our school, and my street name was Mighty Moore, because your street name is the opposite of your persona. Now, I'm over 250 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
They would call me little. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I weighed like 65 pounds. I was really small. This is during everybody knows who Mighty Mouse is, during the Mighty Mouse era.
Yeah.
So they kind of took they called me Mighty Moore during that, because Mighty Mouse was the dopest cartoon on television, and I was the weakest, so they called me Mighty. Amongst this group I hung out with.
It's not like calling the big guy tiny, right?
Yeah. It's the same thing, and so I painted Mighty Moore on the water tower. And
you climbed at the top of the water tower and painted Mighty Moore.
Well, no, it was there's poles that hold the water tower up. I just painted on one of the poles, that holds the water tower up. And I'm really smart. It's about 100 yards behind my school. Mm-hmm. So at recess, we're out there, and I'm bragging, showing all my buddies my beautiful artwork. And I look up, and there was a metal sign. There was an anti-graffiti project in Maryland. Mm-hmm. So what they would do, and this water tower kept having graffiti on it over and over again. So they took this little plate, like size of a license plate, and they drill it into the water tower. And it said, I can't remember the exact economic reward. It was like, I don't know, like $1,500 or $1,000, leading to the arrest of the person who did this. And my buddies, they saw dollar signs, and so
we can make legal money, not drug money, right?
Yeah. So I was in tremendous trouble. Well, literally the next day, my grandparents, my mom's parents, showed up, and they were doing some missionary work in Africa, mm-hmm. and they're coming back from Africa. And you think how tired they were and all the stuff they had dealt with, doing this work in Africa, and they come in and they're in the house. I'm sure they started seeing kind of the dynamics going on in the house, spending a couple of days with us, and they just said to my parents, "Hey, we're going to take Christian to Utah with us," and they put me on a plane, and I literally learned that there are two Americas, and I had no idea. I was like, "Holy cow!" I went from one of the one of the greatest public school systems in the country to like the #1 high school for sending kids to college, like Mitt Romney's kids, going to the school, if that makes sense out there. And so let's just say I didn't grow up in the Mitt Romney world, but he knows who he is. And so it was the opposite. And I was like, wait a minute. Give you an example of the second day of school. The teacher asked me a question. Now I wasn't a white kid acting black. Remember, I was raised in an African American home. Mm-hmm. So I spoke some Ebonics and everything. And so the teacher asked me a question I didn't understand. So I just said, "Say what?" And I didn't know how to. I wasn't going to say, "Excuse me, could you please repeat yourself?" In Utah, they pronounce every word. You're probably hearing me a lot better speaker now, but they just speak a little slower in the West sometimes. They pronounce every word. I've never been around anybody that pronounced every word. We fly. It's just the East Coast, basically. We tend to speak faster. Yeah. My joke is I think we have higher IQs on the East Coast. But when I'm speaking across the country, your home state of Texas, slow down and stuff. But yeah.
We don't listen very quickly sometimes, but yeah. When I landed in Salt Lake City yesterday, I'm going, Christian, this is a far cry from Baltimore.
It's
totally
those are listeners that have not been to Utah. The secret out there, the Olympics kind of got the secret out about Utah. But I traveled 7 million miles all across this country, man. Every time I land here in Salt Lake, it takes my breath away. I've lived here for years, and it's like every morning when the sun comes up, the mountains change. It's just incredible. All the seasons change, so you're watching these mountains like a television show. Mm-hmm. They're just breathtaking, and it's one of the most incredible places. So when you answer your teacher, say what? What was her response? So she sends me down, to the principal's office for disrespecting her. Yeah, and going down to the principal's office. I walk a little, hop in my step and stuff. I'm going down there, and these two kids are like, "Why do you walk and talk, different?" They're kind of mocking, and the one kid said, "Why are you talking? Walk like a black person." I said, I'll be really frank, I'm just kind of toned down. They used another word. Mm-hmm. And they used the N word.
Well, you figure out what it is.
Yeah. He used another word. And so instantly beat both of them up. That moment just started to
You're
so
insulting my family, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
So, my grandparents who take this tremendous, risk to have me come out, a couple of days later, I'm kicked out. I'm in huge trouble in school for, getting into this fight and stuff. And
Did the other kids get kicked out?
Was that? Yeah, they got in trouble. They
Okay.
got in trouble as well. But and then a couple of days later, I flood my grandparents' house. I go up to take a bath, and I talk a lot. And they live in a nice home. And I'm down there. I'm so excited. I'm telling them about something in life. And we're sitting at the kitchen table. And the bathtub is right above the kitchen table, literally. And they have a ceiling fan. And the water comes. We're sitting there, and the water comes flying down through the ceiling fan. And I do $10,000 in damage. Like the first week being in their house, I get kicked out of school. My grandfather was a fisherman. Grew up in Lehigh, Utah. He was in World War II, was a bombardier. Got shot down out of a plane. Was in a German prison camp for 2 years. And here's a quick story of resilience for you. He would take, within this prison camp, he would take all the dirt from one side of the cell and move it to the other side of the cell because they're sitting in these cells. And a lot of people are losing their minds a little bit, they're breaking down. So my grandfather told all the other, soldiers and stuff, hey, all the U.S. soldiers, trade your, they would bring Red Cross rations in, like 2 cigarettes. And he told them, hey, trade the cigarettes for the bread with soldiers from other parts of the world. So all the U.S. soldiers, traded their 2 cigarettes, to get the bread. Yeah. And then he says, I want you from 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock, take all the dirt from the right-hand side of your cell and put it on the left-hand side of the cell, and then put it in the next corner, for the next thing. And because you just something to do, moving this dirt around, just keep their minds going. Then he said, like at 12 o'clock, I want you to lay on your back, close your eyes, and drive around your hometown. So he would drive around, take your girlfriend on a date, your significant other, and he would just in your mind. And then, like, these soldiers just started thriving, improving. He's been a grand marshal and all these praise. So imagine I go from Momma Jackson to this World War II, we know the greatest generation, and they understand resilience. And my grandfather, right before he died, he goes, you go around the world teaching resilience. And I said, yeah, I show people how to use their challenge, their problem as their best friend. And I'll never forget, he goes, they don't know that. And I go, no, like, Papa, we live in a world where we try to get rid of the problem. We do problem. The World War II generation usually saw the problem as a fuel source. Like, oh, I got to step it up now. I got to do this. I got to do that. And I believe that from my perspective, saying I'm right. I think that's why we consider the greatest generation. Yes. And so what's interesting is he was a fisherman, and he took me up on this river almost every day after school. And he would just talk to me about life and things he overcame. And I'm catching these beautiful rainbow trout, looking at these 10,000-foot peak mountains and all this stuff. And we'd go home, cut it up, cook it up. And, he just taught me some powerful skills. I was so excited. I found a beautiful spot on a river that I was pulling fish out left and right. So it was a Saturday morning. And my grandfather just helped you understand where I went from the Baltimore area to this experience. Yeah. I'm sitting there, sleeping, sound asleep. And my grandfather wakes me up early in the morning, like 6 a.m. All right, we're going to go fishing. We got to do one thing. But before we go fishing, I got a stump in the backyard, and you're gonna pull it out, and then we'll go fishing, and we'll go to your favorite hamburger spot. I'm like, awesome. All right, let me see where the tree is, where the stump is. I walked over, I looked at it, and it was probably about 1 foot by half a foot. This big stump in the ground, and he hands me a shovel. And I start working at it. And I kind of go in the house, 20 minutes later, I'm like, hey, Papa, I'm not making much progress. I'm getting the stump out the ground. And he's like, no, keep working at it. I go another 30 minutes. Now I'm kind of mad because my arms are hurting. This thing isn't going nowhere. And I'm still working on it. He's like, I'm walking the house, 5, 6 times. And he's just sitting there eating his breakfast, smiling at me. Hey, go get it done. We'll go fishing. And I'm like, okay. I go back out there. My anger is just increasing because I'm thinking, he knows I can't get the stump out the ground. And so, do the best. Now, he finally comes out about noon. And I'm mad because, I want to be out there in my fishing hole, and stuff. And he's like, well, there's a thing called leverage. And so he gets some crowbars and he starts, showing me, how to each root up. And he goes, you know what makes this tree so strong? It has all these roots in the ground and stuff. Well, long story short, it took us a long time to get that stump out of the ground. It's the hardest work I've ever done. And he just said, Christian, this is how you have to attack life. When you first started taking that stump out of the ground, you knew you couldn't do it. But when you learned about leverage, and I gave you better tools, he gave me sharper tools and started doing this stuff. And then Gideon even got his truck, hooked up to part of the thing. He created a wedge and with the biggest roots. And we made all this progress. And that was a life-changing moment for me. He tied it to being in the prison camp, that he had to do hard things when he was in the prison camp and stuff. And just watching, I actually shared this story when I spoke at his funeral. And that was one of the major life-changing stories is he really taught me hard work. He taught me I could get much further in this world because he knew I struggled academically. Even at that time, I didn't even know how to read. And he knew I had these severe learning disabilities.
And you were 16, didn't know how to read.
Yeah, about 7. I knew how to read probably at that age, at like maybe a second grade reading level, third at that time in my life. I didn't read, very well at that time. And my grandfather knew that. He was worried about me. And he said to me, Christian, you're going to make it in this world through hard work. And just speed up later, 20 years later, I was working over 100 hours a week if you consider all my travel time and get from place to place across the country. I mean, I get 3-4 hours of sleep for years. And he's the one people are like, man, how you work that hard? And my grandfather said, and you'll experience a rush. And when that stump came out of that ground and all that dirt was flying up, it was euphoric. Yeah. And it's the greatest experience of my life, just watching that thing go across the sidewalk and this massive stump. And we conquered, this stump. And he said, what you're feeling right now, that's how you feel when you work hard, when you overcome, when you do it. I was like, wow. And so when I deal with crises in my life, and I'll share, even to this day I'm dealing with crisis, but I got to do the stump. I got to rip them stumps out. You know what I mean? And so I'm glad he taught me that.
Your grandfather was a very wise man. He knew what he was doing. And what a great influence to have in your life after, your parents, I'm not dogging your parents, but they weren't going to teach you those lessons.
Oh, no, that was the opposite. I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't know how to do anything.
Well, if anything, when you're reading at a second grade level, you've got to be able to read and write to be able to make it in this world, right?
Yeah.
But then, we talked about I said in the opening that you did it, you've done what you've done with your life through persistence, but also love. Momma Jackson was the first unconditional love that you really experienced with Sean.
No,
okay,
absolutely.
The whole family.
Yeah, the love, and Moses, I want to mention Moses, the father. He was working for...
Moses was Sean's dad.
Yeah, Sean's dad.
I've never heard about Moses.
Yeah, I shared with him about Moses because he was out of the same mold my grandfather was out of. He was younger, but he was a World War II guy. I mean, a greatest generation guy. And this guy was amazing, man. He barely spoke, the quietest person I've ever met in my life to this day. When he speaks, it's real soft, real quiet. But when he tells you something, you better do it.
You better listen.
You better listen. He does not play. And he just quietly tell you what he needs you to do and stuff. But we'd be sitting at that dinner table, man. The guy was just ripped. I mean, these huge arms and just perfect physical condition. And I didn't learn until years later why he was in this, incredible condition. He worked for the train service there, Amtrak there, and he was a plumber for him, and he was incredibly to this day one of the hardest workers I've ever met in my life. And I realize now I know the cost of food and raising a family, and they weren't wealthy by any means, and I get today the sacrifice to feed me that much that he did. And so, I know my grandfather, Momma Jackson, gets lots of credit and stuff, but Moses, a very spiritual person, and I understand why they named him Moses, but he's incredible. His work ethic literally had a huge impact on my life. So being exposed to the two men that really taught me to work were, Moses and my grandfather.
Absolutely. Back to love. Yeah. You met somebody in Provo.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. So, it's that 9th grade year. Well, best friends with this guy named Dave, and his sister has this cute little sister, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pop over to their house all the time. He became, you know, a really good friend of mine. And then, you know, me and Wendy stayed friends for a long time. I kind of bounced back and forth between Utah and Maryland, you know, going back there. And so when I was about 21 years old, come back out here to Utah, and I'm like, wow, Wendy really grew up. So I quickly fall in love with her. And I almost immediately as I start falling in love with her, I start having pretty intense panic attacks, because I'm thinking to myself, this girl doesn't know really what she's dealing with me. And I'm not really telling a lot of people in Utah my childhood, my, you know, running the streets and all that stuff. So I'm like, man, I need to let her go. You know, they say if you love someone, you think you're gonna hurt them, you need to let them go. And I'm like, I don't know how to make a living. It was like 28 years old before I even made like $6 an hour, you know. So I'm like, this girl needs to run from me. I'm like, Wendy, I might be fun on a date, but you need to go hook up street smart enough. Now, where I was living, there's all these high tech companies. I'm like, Wendy, you gotta go marry one of these dudes that's making over $50,000 a year. These are functional people. You need to run.
And you broke up with her.
Yeah, I broke up with her. And she came to me a couple days later. She's like, look, Christian, I know you're learning disabled. I know you're dumb, lazy, attitude problem, troublemaker. She gave me all
she
my
did not
words.
go through the school of communication, I'm thinking.
No. But she literally got down on one knee and she says, if you marry me, you never have to worry about employment. I will support you. I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. I thought to myself, I may be learning disabled, but this homeboy ain't stupid. That's the woman for me. So I married her because I really did love her. Not because I never had to work another. But you know what, I can tell you, Josh, she took advantage of me. Because again, I've flown 7 million miles around this planet, worked 100 hours a week, and she said to me, look, either you're gonna go to prison or you're gonna try to change this world. So anyway, so yeah, Wendy read all my textbooks to me in college. She typed up all my papers. To this day, I don't know how to type on a computer.
Tell the story though, because you supported her while she was going to college.
Yeah.
And then
while I was going to college, she supported me.
She encouraged you to go to college because you, in your
she
mind,
never went to college. She
didn't. Okay. No. But in your mind, college wasn't for you. It was not. It was like, you know, a dream that just couldn't be fulfilled.
No, college was no way.
But tell us about her and her getting you to apply.
Yeah. So it was a local, at the time it was community college. She tells me to apply to it, and I'm like, Wendy, I've never taken the SAT or ACT. It took me till I was almost 20 years old to get a high school diploma. I was in special ed all the way through school. I didn't know what 9 times 6 is. I don't know how to tell time on a hand clock, because me, a quarter to 5 equals 25 minutes to 5. But how could a quarter, you know, I'm like, anyway, so they tell me a quarter is 15 or whatever.
Sure,
how could a quarter not be 25? I don't know what I say.
I want our audience to really think about this, because these learning disabilities don't go away with age.
No.
I mean, how much success you've achieved in the
they still
world.
haven't jumped off my shoulder today.
No, they're still there, but you found a way to work through them and still do. But I mean, that is true love. I mean, it's a testament to that there is great love in this world, from Momma Jackson to now Wendy.
Yeah, and that's that unconditional love. You know, you look at all the people I mentioned, my grandfather, my grandmother, called Nana, to Momma Jackson, to Moses, to Sean, they're all unconditional. And Wendy, next level unconditional. I didn't even know what unconditional love was until probably married 25 years, but to say she's unconditional is a understatement. And
tell the story of applying.
Yeah, she tells me to apply local, college there, and I'm kind of mocking her. I'm like, okay, I'll do this for you, but they're not gonna let me in. There's no way. And sure enough, I get the letter back, and I'm accepted. And I'm jumping up and down on the couch, and Wendy's laughing because she's like, "It's open enrollment. They let everybody in. You're not special." And I'm like, "Oh, that hurts, man." And I'm like, "Did you know that?" She goes, "Yes." And I'm like, "Anyways." So I get into the.
It was very humbling.
It was a humbling moment. It was a humbling moment, but
you still had to go. You had to work.
Yeah. And my grandmother, my grandmother put up to $700 for my grandparents. And people think $700 for tuition. That was a long time ago. Yeah, it was 30 years ago. And I'm in class for just a little bit, and I've got all Fs, and I'm about to drop out. And there's actually another student that changed my life. He turned to me and goes, "Hey, I know you fell in this class. Just get a D-. You get credit with a D-." So I went and asked the school council, I'm like, is that true? And she's like, yeah, you get just as much credit with a D minus, but you won't be able to transfer. You won't be able to go to graduate school or anything. Like, that was my big concern at the time.
Yeah, I just want to get out of community
Yeah,
college.
but she goes, yeah, I guess you can do that. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get all D minuses. And so I just started going to every class. I sit on the front row. I do all the homework assignments. I do enough extra credit to get a D minus. If the professor said, do a 10-page paper, I do a 20-page paper. One time I did a 60-page paper. So I'd keep Wendy up all night because I couldn't type, and I'd write everything out on a piece of paper. She'd type it up, and the next day, I'd hand this massive paper to the professor, and the professor was like, man, you didn't have to go to that extreme, but I learned something magic. If you do more work than the person helping you, they'll usually open up another door for you. If you saw someone working harder,
say that again, because that's a great lesson.
Yeah. If you do more work than the person helping you, they will knock down 1,000,000 doors for you. So think about it. I know my wife and I mentor people. When I see a kid I'm mentoring, whether it's adult, a kid, people I'm doing therapy with, when they're working harder than me, I will write letters, knock down doors, talk to judges, whatever I need to do to put this person in a better situation. Because it's something in our human condition when we see someone, putting 110% effort into something, if they're failing, most humans will help that person to the extreme. Now, luckily, I don't know how I figured that out at the time.
We got a lot of street smart.
Yeah.
That's part of being street smart.
Yeah.
But they've earned that. They've earned the right for you to say, okay, I'm going to go the extra mile for you.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, we only value what we earn.
Yeah, absolutely.
We only place value in what we earn. Giving somebody something, whatever it is, doesn't place value in it for them. Yeah. But the humans, you're right. People will show kindness, compassion. They will show compassion to people and go, this person's busting their ass. I mean, I shared with you the story last night. I just finished reading Booker T. Washington's autobiography.
Yeah, that's I've shared that.
Yes, and to get into the Hamilton Institute in Virginia, I believe is where it was, he was asked to go clean a room while they were kind of evaluating his, he had no resources. He had no reason to be at the Hamilton Institute. But he went in and he said, I'm going to clean this room better than anybody has ever cleaned a room. And he did. And it impressed the teacher, and she became an advocate for him, and he found a way to get an education because he did it. He earned it. He showed that he wanted it, and that's what this is about. Is we live in a culture now that I don't think this is most people. I don't think it's mainstream, but people are like, I'm entitled to it. I should have this. I'm privileged. I should have. And I hate the word privilege.
Yeah.
But I should have this because I'm whatever, and that transcends every race, religion, whatever. Everybody has people that think that they're entitled to something. You're not entitled to jack shit, okay? You're entitled to what you earn, and that is all you're entitled to.
So to say that I had that reinforced to me is an understatement. Now, not to push back on you hard. I'm a clinical social worker, and I don't overlook the support. And we were talking in the drive here. You pointed out to me, I have this tremendous support system. Without that support system for me is the laces in my shoes to pull myself up, by those bootstraps. We tell people, hey, you got to work hard, you got to do it. But nobody's resilient on an island. I had to get help from a lot of other people. So, I had to put all the effort in. And that's why I saw that no-F game plan, by just, doing more work than the person helping me. But I needed, the help to finish the story. The professor was so impressed with my work ethic, he got me a scholarship. And that's the only reason I stayed for that next semester. Yeah. I was on they call it Presidential Ambassador Scholarship. I actually got to represent the college when the Board of Regents was looking at funding for this, millions of dollars in funding. They would have me sit in there, which is insane. I had put this green, the colors of the college was green, and they gave me a green blazer with an emblem on it. And I'm sitting there with the people who control funding for education for the state of Utah, and they'd ask me to speak for 10 minutes. I'm like, I'm your worst student at this college, and you have me in front. But I'm sure that because my verbal skills or whatever, they were like, okay. But that professor changed my life, and he gave me that scholarship.
Think of the irony there, right? Because they're probably looking at your academic record and all going, really? This is a. But I think it's wonderful. That reinforces the goodness of humankind to me. There are a lot of good people out there. We rarely hear about them. All you hear about is the jerks and the assholes. But there's a lot of really good people out there. I want to move into the book.
Okay.
So the book, The Resilience Breakthrough, is an outstanding book. And when I say Christian's an expert on resilience, he's an expert on resilience. You open the book telling the story of the phone call you get from the dean of the school who has to say you can graduate.
Yeah.
And he tells you can't graduate, and you say you're in a ball of tears on the floor in the fetal position.
Yeah.
Would you describe that moment and tell us what happened?
Yeah, this moment, I mean, I've spent 8 years in college essentially, over $65,000 out of my own pocket. Nobody gave me any money for college. I'm working 2 jobs, my wife's working 2 jobs, and there's laws. There's something called 504 Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which helps students with learning disabilities be able to receive, higher education. And right now, because of these laws, George Bush Sr., get these laws passed for people with disabilities to be able to, go to college with all different types of disabilities.
Was that part of the ADA?
Yes, yeah, part of the ADA that Bush passed and stuff. And so, wow. I'm literally like one class away, pretty much from graduating. I got to take a social research methods class and stuff, and that's kind of the class, that's my accommodation for my math stuff. Well, the dean sees this, he's kind of upset because it's kind of a prestigious university I'm at. I transferred from the community college into this major university. When I applied to the university on the application, I said, I don't meet any of your requirements. People like me break into your homes, your cars, please let me in this university. And so,
did you really?
Yeah.
People like me break into your
homes and cars. In my application to this major university, I just said, hey, and I just argue, I go, our society makes no sense. We take the people who do the best academically, and we have them spend more time with the other people who do the best academically. If the way out of poverty is education, why would we not take the people who struggle the most academically and have them spend time with the people who do the best academically? If I want to become a better golfer, if I play golf with Michael Jordan, if I play basketball with Michael Jordan, he does have a pretty good golf. But if I play basketball with Michael Jordan, I become a better basketball player. If I play golf with Tiger Woods, I become a better golfer. I got to spend 8 years with academics, so I became more academic, so, and so, it's just that exposure. I wrote that on the application, and it got a bunch of people's attention. They're like, wow, that's interesting perspective. And there was a lady by the name Dr. Shirley Cox who was on the committee, and this university turns down, sometimes 20, 30,000 incoming freshmen, one of the toughest schools to get in. And she said, I'll take him over all the other students.
Really? And
she said, this guy is going to make a difference one day. And I talked about hitting the lottery. And she became a mentor for me all the way through school. It's funny, I'll never forget, she sat me down and says, listen, Christian, she calls me up, she goes, you come study social work here. I got you into the school of social work. You cannot study engineering. It's a private school. We could get away with this. You think I'd have autonomy to choose any major I want? No, they gave me no choice. They're like, you can study social work. I'll never forget this. She said, if you were responsible for putting fuel in the space shuttle, it would never get up off the ground. And she goes, I don't know what this is about my professional social, but it kind of ticks me off because social work is a soft science. Human beings are the most complex thing on the planet. I'd say what I'm doing is 10 times harder than an engineer because, there's laws in the engineering world, human world. There's no law. I mean, humans are complex. And so I'm like, man, a little side note, I apologize to that. Hey, engineers are brilliant. Yeah, try to be a social. Anyways, so, you take A plus B equals C. There's no A plus B equals C in mental health.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, anyways.
Are you still in touch with her, by the way?
Yeah. Over the years, I've been very close with her. And she just said, not to share something too spiritual, but this is a spiritual experience for me. She, at the end of graduating, and this is right before I get this call, I'll get back to that story. She says to me, she knew she was at that university to get me through, and I've had the opportunity to impact millions of people. She just said, hey, I knew you'd impact millions, and that's why I was there.
Wow.
And then she retired, like right after I left.
No kidding, really?
She said that's what her higher power told me.
Wow.
Okay, and that, boy, I tell you,
I got chills.
Before you start your career and a professor says, I'm here for you, and this is what, God sent me here to do. I was like, wow. And so that was a humbling moment. And so again, she was literally my Momma Jackson of my higher ed. So there's always been an amazing woman that showed up in my life when I'm in crisis or in trouble. And it's funny, I'm a little bit of let's just say, I'm a huge advocate of women. Does that make sense? And so I fight for their rights. I fight for a lot of stuff. I think, women are the most amazing people on the planet.
They are complex.
Yeah, they're complex, but
we're pretty simple creatures. You feed us, you fool around with us, we're okay. Women are layers deep, man. But you got to admire the differences between men and women. But you're right. I've hired a lot of women in my career. You hire a smart woman and just get out of her way. She won't ever let you down. She's loyal, and she'll find a way. If she needs help, she'll come ask for it. But you don't need to micromanage a smart woman. Just let her go do her thing.
No, there's a lot of women listening. All the women listening, I'm going to tease you a little bit here, but a woman should not be loyal. They should be free. They should not follow what every man is telling them to do. So, see, I'm a little bit feminist right here, but so I'm going to save you right now. You don't ever want to use the word loyal.
Well, loyal meaning is they're your advocate.
No, I know. I'm just defending the women right now.
Yeah. In the work environment, they'll take a bullet for you.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you on that.
Fiercely protect you, and I've witnessed that overall, and all the women I've hired, I'm still great friends with.
Yeah.
This is over 30 years ago,
Yeah. I'm just teasing because I've spent a lot of my life trying to make sure women don't feel like they have to do something or they're obligated, because I think they're taken advantage of a lot of times by the male population. So, anyways, that's
a whole different podcast. But you're right. Men and women have equal opportunity for everybody. But again, go earn what you get, right? But anyway, but you have.
Thanks for letting me teach you about that.
So get in line. Everybody teaches you. That's okay. It's all for fun. But tell me about tell us about the phone. You were at the race, and if it was like a 440 or 400 meter race, you're at the finish line. You're about to cross the tape.
Yeah.
Tell us about that phone call.
He calls me up and he just says, "Hey, I'm the dean of the College of Home and Family Sciences. You're not graduating. How the heck did you get this far in this university with your background?" Because he's seen all my transcripts now. He's seen he's freaking out. He's like, this guy just played our whole higher education system in a way. He was furious. And now, to be really frank, that was a hard moment because I already felt like I was an academic fraud.
Yeah, you wrote that in the book. You bared your soul in the book.
Yeah, but to have someone call you up, so I get emotional, and tell you you're academic fraud. That was one of the lowest moments of my life. I fell to the ground. I remember this, 30 years ago, it was the phone with the cord on the receiver. I just remember the phone hitting the floor and stuff. And I got my composure. One of the skills I teach in my book is no means next option. To be resilient, you cannot accept no. Now, if you're going to harm someone else, you better accept no. But take things. But I really don't believe in no, and that's been a key thing to help my resilience. And the receiver, I'm really laying on the floor sobbing, and he luckily stays on the line. He's probably wondering what the heck is going on. I get back on the line. I say, "Sir," I live 5 minutes from where he is. I said, "Hey, I have to meet with you in person. Please let me come talk to you. I gotta explain this I get it. I know you look at my situation on paper, it makes no sense, but you gotta meet me. Let me just sit down with you and explain to you kind of what's going on." And he's like, "All right, I'll give you 10 minutes. I walked out. My grandfather, remember he's out working on these rose bushes in the front of his house. And I remember him I walked out, I said, "Papa, they won't let me graduate." And I explained to him the context of what was going on. He's like, "I'm going over there with you. This is World War II, but they don't know how damn hard you work." And this man doesn't cuss. And he's like, "Those sons of bitches." And he's just losing his mind. And I remember just seeing his gloves on, and he takes those gloves off, that he's doing these rose bushes, throws them on the ground. And it's got the same sorry. He has got the same emotions. And he's ready to go to war with me. He goes, "I'll go over with you." And I said, "Papa, look, I'm going to go there by myself. And I'll have you help me if I can't figure this out." But, and he just said to me, "Look, Christian, you'll get a lot further." Sorry.
That's fine.
with kindness, because he knew I was going to go there and explode. And he's just, it's this thing. He's like, you're going to get a lot further with honey or the vinegar, type.
Yeah.
And he goes, Christian, you did the work. You did 10 times the work, because he knew how hard I was studying. Like I'd studied sometimes 20 to 30 hours for the same test. And many people say an hour or two. I ask my parents, how many hours you study for that test? They're like, I'm an hour or two. I'm studying 20 hours.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fine. Take your time.
So my grandfather, it's interesting. I've never shared it verbally out loud the story. I put that in the book. And so I started the book. I think this is the most intense moment of my life. I don't think I've even verbalized it because it's a very traumatic experience. So right now, I think it's the first time I've verbalized it. And it says it happened, in a public event. So my I got my 10-speed bike. I ride over to the campus and I look at my grandfather.
Take your time.
And tears are streaming down his eyes. So I walk into the dean's office and I just thank him. I'm like, hey, thank you for letting me be here. And he starts yelling at me. And he just says, look, you shouldn't be here on this campus. And he's like, how'd you pull this off? And he's like, and I'm telling him this, it's called the No F gameplay. A little side note, we've taken now thousands of kids with all Fs and taught them those 3 things: go to every class, sit on the front row, do all the homework assignments, do enough extra credit to get a D-. And I just thank him for the opportunity. I say, hey, I know I shouldn't be here. On paper, I should not be here. And I was the first person with severe learning disabilities to make it that far in their system and stuff. And so he just, I'm sitting there talking to him, and I just said, look, this is how hard I studied. And he goes, we do this, we almost be giving you a college degree with your background. And I go, no, you ain't giving me nothing. I'm the hardest working student that ever showed up here at this school. You're not handing me anything, which is stupid, I'm negotiating with this guy to get help, but it was so offensive. He's just like, no, look, we can't do this for you. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I just begged him. I said, listen, if you let me graduate, from this university, I'm gonna make sure every learning disabled kid knows the reality of the laws and higher education as a private university. It doesn't have to follow 504 or IDA and these federal laws. And I just said, look, if you let me do this, I'm just begging him. I said, I will have an impact. I'll impact millions of people one day, but my doorway out is this college degree, and you know it. And we had this intense conversation, and then he just said, I don't even know how you did this. And I said to him, hey, I'll tell you how I did it. If you really want to know how I did it, my higher power enabled me to do this. And he was like, just stunned when I said that. Just kind of say, hey, something bigger than me helped me do this, because it's not logical for me to be here. And he said,
it's not.
Yeah, and he said, we're going to let you graduate now. Here's how dumb I am. So I've already given him a lecture. I'm not telling me he's letting me graduate. So I didn't really follow my grandfather's rules. And I said to him again, you're not letting me do anything. I did the work. I paid the price. Even after he said, I'm going to let you graduate, dumbest thing I've ever done. It's like get in a cell, walk out the room. And I was too stupid. And he just said, hey, don't push it. And I'll see you at graduation day. I walked over, gave him a hug. And he wasn't hugging me back really hard, but I was so grateful. To this day, that guy is one of my heroes, even though he put me through hell and back, one of the worst experiences of my life. To be really frank with you, going to college was one of the worst experiences of my life, just the stress and the challenges and stuff. I mean, running a major business has been easier than going to college for me. The real world of interacting, it makes me sad. There's so many kids like me that would thrive in this world, but they never get the opportunity for higher education because, one, they may not know how to advocate for themselves. They don't understand the laws. They don't have a support system. So, I have a huge debt to pay. And that's, people always ask me, well, how did you work 100 hours a week? It's that pain right there that you're hearing me talk about. That's why I work 100 hours a week. That's why I continue to do this work. Because if I got this opportunity in America, every Hispanic, African American child, I don't care where you're from, if Christian Moore got this opportunity in America, every child should get the opportunity in America. I'm not saying higher education is for everybody, but you should at least know the options, and you can't access something you don't know about.
You're not a victim of your learning disabilities.
Yeah.
You're not. You're not a victim. Nobody's a victim.
Yeah.
If you can walk, talk, think, and do, you can achieve. You can find fulfillment in your life.